In this video, we're going to look at charts and graphs and how we can format those charts and graphs to look the way that we want them to look. Let's jump into it. The first type of graph that I want to show how to create will involve each of our four categories of data. So let's click and drag the titles for the classes and for the exercise activity, including the data, and then let's click Insert, Chart. This will automatically produce a chart that Sheets thinks is the best option for the data. In this case, they chose stacked column chart. I think a different type of chart will probably serve this data a little better though. So over here in the Setup tab, under Chart Type, I'm going to click there, and we can look at all the different types of charts and graphs that we can use. In this case, let's choose column chart. In this chart, Sheets is organized by class, so class 1, class 2, class 3, and each bar or each column represents one of the different activities. The key tells us which color is connected with which activity. They also automatically populate a title based on what they think the graph is about. In this case, they just took the names of each of the columns and turned it into a title. Let's look at a bunch of different ways that we can customize this graph though. The first thing that we can do is change the title. In order to do that, I'm just going to double click on the title itself. Let's call this graph Exercise in a Week. When we click away, that will now be our new title. We can also change the formatting of the title if we want. We can double click on it and we can select Title Format. I'm going to center align it. We can bold it. And I'm also going to change the text color. Instead of having that gray color, I'm going to switch it to black. You can also change these colors if you want. In order to do that, you'll just double click on each of the bars. I'm going to change the color to a grayscale, which will work better for printing out on a black and white printer. You'll also notice that this graph doesn't have any titles on the axes. So let's go ahead and add a title on the vertical axis. To do that, you're going to right-click. On Chart and Axis Titles, you'll select Vertical Axis Title. And then over here, you'll type in the text. I'm going to just change it to activities, or let's say number of activities. If we want, we can also add a title to the horizontal axis. So we'll right-click and do horizontal axis. Let's call it science classes. We can imagine that each of these classes is a different science class at the same school. We have some other options as well. We can change the formatting on these numbers. For example, by double-clicking on the numbers themselves, we can enter a new minimum value. Let's say because every class had at least 10 instances of each activity in a week, we change the minimum value to 10. And because the maximum was 22, let's change the maximum to 25 so we have a little space above it. And now we have a new scale for this graph. This can be important because it really does dramatically change the way the data is interpreted. If I go ahead and undo to go back to the old scale, we can see just how differently these two graphs look. So if we want to share this chart, we now have a few options. We click on these three buttons. The first thing we can do is we can download it. We can download it as an image file. So if we download PNG image, now when we open that PNG file, we have a chart that's an image. You can also download it as a PDF document if you'd like. And you can also just copy the chart. Let's say that you want to move the chart to a Google Doc. You can paste it. When you paste it, so I just hit Command V on my Mac, it would be Control V to paste on a PC. You have two options. You can link to the spreadsheet, which means as you change values in the spreadsheet, so if you update your values for sports for class 1, they'll update on the chart, or you can paste it unlinked, in which case the values won't change. So I'm going to paste it both ways, and we can see the difference. So when we go back, if I change this to 14, you can see in the graph it automatically changed. You can also see we now have the option to update on here, and it updates it. If you didn't update it, it would stay the same. This graph, because it's unlinked, doesn't have that option. Before moving on to a different chart, I want to talk about a couple more quick formatting changes that we can make to this chart. For the legend itself, you also have a bunch of different options. If you double click on it, you can change the positioning of the legend. So if you want the legend on the right, you can click there. Inside, we'll put it actually inside the graph. Top, we'll put it on top of the graph. And if you want to actually change the words included in the legend or at the bottom of the chart, you can just change those directly in the sheet itself. So let's say in class 1, we want to say class A. Now, that class A shows up here. And if you want to change this to, say, soccer or basketball, you can make that change and it will show up here. Let's take a look at some of the other options that Sheets offers for creating graphs and diagrams. Instead of selecting all of the data, maybe we just want to make a chart that includes the classes and their sports activities. In that case, we would only select the classes and the data for the sports. Then we would go to Insert, Chart, and it now offers us an option for a type of chart that we can use. In this case, it offers a pie chart. But we can go over to Chart Type, and we can look at some of the different options that they have. So let's say that maybe we want to do a line chart. A line chart is probably not the best way to convey information about the number of sports activities that each class participated in, but you can imagine a situation where you're collecting data over time from a specific spot or from different locations, and you want to see how that data changes. A line graph would be one way to show that change over time. In this case, it would be showing a rise over time. Of course, that's not the data that we're working with in this case. Just like with the bar graph that we used in the other example, we can make a lot of modifications to this. So we can change the title. Let's leave it at sports, but let's change the color to black. Let's center it. In this case, because there's only one category, the sports automatically shows up on the y-axis instead of having a key. And so we can change the text here if we'd like. We can change it to sports activities per week or something like that. We can, of course, right-click again if we want to add a horizontal axis title. Similar to the bar graph, again, we can double click here and we can input minimum values or maximum values for the y-axis. And then once we're done, we can download it as a PNG file, or we can copy the chart and paste it in a Word document or in a Google Doc. Similarly, we saw that we can make a chart with all the data by selecting all of it. We can make a chart with just one column of data by selecting our categories and the column with the data. You can do the same thing where you create a chart with two separate columns. So in this case, we'll insert the chart. They suggest that we do a stacked column chart, but let's go ahead and switch it to a line chart so that we can compare. In this case, instead of having sports on the y-axis, they go back to the key. And again, all of the same formatting options will be the same for this chart as they were for the other ones. Finally, what if instead of including sports and dancing, we wanted to include dancing and running? In that case, we would start off by selecting classes 1, 2, 3. We would then, on a PC, hold Control, on a Mac, hold Command, and while you're holding that button down, you'll select the dancing column, and again, while holding that button down, you'll click and drag to select the running column. Now again, insert the chart, and it gives you a stacked column chart.